Welcome to A State of Mind. I am so happy to be bringing you a new episode of this podcast because I know the power of conversations to change lives. You can learn more about each episode in the show notes below, and you can support our podcast by checking out our sponsors with the links below. It would also help us out a lot if you left us a review or gave us a comment or just shared about this with your friends and family. I am so grateful to Ka and Pathogenics for supporting this podcast. They create amazing products with Kana. Kana is a traditional herb from South Africa, and there's been these amazing science studies showing that it increases empathy and compassion in people who take it. So it's often connected with the heart, and that's been my experience with it as well. It will elevate your mood, help you feel better. It can be a fun kind of social lubricant, a great alternative to things like alcohol. I just opened up this package they sent me. They've got these amazing chews. And then they've got this tincture here. I really like the tincture because you could take just a little bit, or you could take more, medium or large dose. And definitely consult your healthcare provider before taking this or any supplements. Kana does act on the serotonin system, so be aware of that. Wow, they also sent me this journal and a bunch of stickers. So thank you, Ka and Pathogenics. Check out the link below to order yours. And thank you to Mycelium for supporting this podcast. Mycelium is making an amazing lineup of products using functional mushrooms along with other supportive herbs. So they just sent me this package in the mail. They've got products here to help with immune boosting. They've got this really awesome cacao blend, a coconut creamer you could add to tea or coffee. They even have an electrolyte mix with functional mushrooms and other supportive herbs. They've got a product for increasing energy, for increasing focus, and for increasing calm, which I tried the other day, and it's really nice. So check out the links below. They're a really amazing company, and it's a great way to support the podcast. Definitely consult with your healthcare provider again before taking this or any other supplements. Welcome to A State of Mind, a place where we explore the changing waves of experience. Every moment, every feeling, every thought, and each season of life is like a state of mind in constant motion. Wherever you are, whatever you're experiencing, if you could take a snapshot of that moment, that would be a state of mind, a moment on a wave within this vast field of awareness. And it's interesting, I came up with this name, A State of Mind, some years ago, the same in my company, the same in my podcast. And it's interesting because I think it's pointing to a reality that everything we experience in life is a conscious experience. And in a certain sense, everything we experience is consciousness itself, consciousness experiencing itself. But I don't really believe in a particular state of mind. I'm not trying to get to a certain state of mind. What I think is really healing and empowering is when we can have insight into the underlying substrate of our experience, this vast field of connection. And if we measure something, or if we take a picture of something, or even if we have a memory of something, it's a kind of snapshot, and we've crystallized something that in the actual moment of experience was fluid, was emotion, and was actually connected with everything else that's happening. So that's been part of my perspective and my inspiration with the name, and I'm excited to have you all here for a solo episode of this podcast. Something that I've been encouraging in people that I'm working with and in myself is a connection with the earth. And it's wonderful if we can connect to nature. I think just spending time in nature is healing, but I think it's really important to connect with nature on a daily basis, even if you're inside all day, through your meditation practice, through taking a moment to feel the ground. And so the word earth, we're part of this big planet, and the qualities of the ground are of stability, of unmovingness, of unchangingness. There's a strength in the ground. We can feel into that, and we can lean into it, and we can be supported by it. And in the Buddhist tradition, there's 5 main elements. There's earth, there's water, there's fire, there's wind, and then there's space. And the earth, in a sense, is foundational, right? It's the foundation. And there's this feeling of gravity, right, that we can actually feel, we can actually notice. And the gravity that's helping hold us to earth, it's a part of that earth element. It's keeping us home. And so if we can feel into a connection with earth, we can extend our awareness down into the earth. We can learn to relax and be supported by the earth. And we can open up to the possibility of experiencing the earth as our mother. I saw an indigenous elder who gave a talk at a ceremony, and they said the problem of so many people that they're seeing is they've been disconnected from the earth and they never understood that the earth was their mother. And that really struck me, and it's something I've been reflecting on. And the kind of way I understand that has shifted recently as I've learned over the years more and more about attachment theory. Our mother and father are our primary attachment figures when we're born. And a lot of us, especially those, seeking therapy or in healing, like our parents aren't perfect. Some of us had really difficult experiences with our parents. Some of us had really good childhoods overall. And yet there were still messages or beliefs or conditioning or things that happened, right? Or things we saw our parents do that weren't great. It can be really healing and an important part of your spiritual practice to have a bigger sense of mother and father that extend beyond your biological parents. And I think that connection with the earth as the mother can be a part of it. Part of what I'm thinking about these days is how we could connect with the earth as our mother, and that could be a source of secure attachment. Most of us aren't flying off in outer space, but even if we do, the element of earth is always there. Even if you're on listening to this on an airplane, you can connect with the earth through your awareness, through the sense of solidity. So in the Buddhist tradition, that earth quality, it's not just what we think of as the planet or the dirt or the ground, but it's certain qualities that are in our body, that are in pretty much any experience. And so those qualities of stability, of strength, of unmovingness, and of that sense of solidity. I guess is maybe the best way to say it. It's really, really helpful to be able to tune into that wherever you're at, and to feel that, and to release into it. And then as you develop that sense of security and safety, which is again connected with the earth element, you can open up more and more into space. And that spacious awareness can become your new home. But the two aren't at odds with each other. The two go together. And interestingly, in tantric Buddhist practice, I think a lot of people don't know this, but the traditional beginning of a sadhana practice, you're actually invoking these 5 elements. It's often done in the form of a ritual chant that people will go over quite quickly. But there's a beautiful visualization that you could slow down, and you start with space, and then wind, and then into the fire, and then into the water, and then into the earth. And there's this interesting visualization where you imagine them stacking on each other in that order, and then you imagine yourself being born out of a sacred seed syllable on top of that earth. And it kind of reverses the normal way we would think about that. Normally you would think of, like I said earlier, earth is foundational, and then maybe the water is on top of the earth, and maybe we create fire, and then there's wind, and then we can see the space around us. But there's something interesting happens subjectively when we reverse that, and you're starting with the space and ending with the earth. And the visualization doesn't really make sense, like logically or rationally. Like, how could the earth and the planet and the earth element be resting on top of water, fire, wind, and space on the bottom? But it's an interesting thing, because part of what Buddhist practice is doing is actually shifting, actually reversing our normal perceptions intentionally at times to help us wake up and see new experiences, new ways of seeing things, kind of break up the patterns there. Another thing I like to remind myself and remind people I'm working with is where our attention goes, our energy flows. And energy is very real. That word gets used a lot. It can sound kind of woo-woo or whatever, but energy is what literally moves us. Energy is released in our car engine, when we start it. And we have energy in our bodies. We all know that. So the ability to direct your attention and to bring energy where you're directing your attention, which happens naturally, but we can make it more conscious and intensify it. That's an important part of bringing healing in and through the body. We're come more and more to the body, and we can bring more energy and more attention, and we can actually bring our focus to places that need it, and it can help them to release, just on a physiological level. We're bringing blood flow there, and we're bringing our life force energy there. And another famous saying we get from neuroscience is circuits that fire together, wire together. So yeah, circuits that fire together, wire together. It's something we hear a lot from neuroscientists and from meditation teachers, and it's pointing to how our brain will, build these grooves and these habitual patterns. And the more we think something, the more we experience something, the more wired those things can be, and the more it can go on the autopilot. And so part of meditation and mindfulness practice is really waking up out of that autopilot. And there's an interesting ancient teaching from the Buddha. Maybe it's one of the earliest teachings, but it's often summarized something like, do no harm, do good, and master your mind. Don't hurt people, try to do good things, and master your mind. And that's an interesting idea, right? That we could master our mind or master our experience. I think it's important to understand when we see Buddhist teachings like that, the word mind that the Buddha was using, the Buddhist tradition is using, it really means more like heart consciousness. It's not mind separate from body. It's referring again to that substrate of experience, the ground of being. I think that's a deeper, more accurate way to understand those teachings. And if we really want to master our mind, we need to investigate the beliefs that are underlying the more surface level thoughts and feelings. So if you start to pay attention to your experience, we're having all these thoughts all the time, and there's different feelings or emotions. And if we're having a certain feeling or a certain emotion, it will tend to feed those thoughts, and those thoughts will tend to feed those feelings, and it creates a kind of circuit, right? It's a feedback loop. And underlying that whole process are these different beliefs. And these beliefs are subconscious, and they've been programmed into us. And a lot of the beliefs, maybe all of them, are really coming from our past. We had experiences in the past that gave us that belief, or we got that belief from our parents or from society. We internalized it, and it's actually there. And there's actually a kind of neurological structure there. Beliefs are something more at a deeper level, right? They're there at a deeper level, and they're more challenging to work with. But it is possible to work with them and to change them and to become free of them. And we need to make this whole process more conscious. So let's see. Yeah, I think a lot of people, when we get into meditation, it is possible to have the experience of going beyond all beliefs, like have that experience of spacious awareness. And I think that's really valuable. But a lot of us have noticed how we might be able to access that in our meditation. We might even be able to access spacious awareness or a sense of freedom from all beliefs, like little moments throughout the day. Like, that's wonderful, that's great. But then you still find yourself back in a lot of those old patterns. And so to heal those patterns and transform them and find real freedom there, it's really helpful to notice the beliefs, which are most often negative and limiting, under the surface, and challenge them and look for evidence that they're not true. And part of what's happening is the beliefs are shaping our perception of what is real, because we have a belief that's subconscious, we're not fully aware of it, and then we are noticing evidence that supports that belief. And so I'm sure you could think of, examples in your own life. Negative belief could be like, no one likes me, right? Or it could even be something more prosaic, like all politicians are idiots, right? And then it's easy to find a ton of evidence out there on media for how dumb all the politicians are. But it's a kind of negative limiting belief, and you don't actually know them in person. Like, you haven't actually talked to them, right? Or spent time to them. So it's good to interrupt that, because these negative limiting beliefs become the prison that we're living in. And one way that we can get rid of these or transform or heal these negative beliefs is to really fixate on and pay attention to evidence that they're not true, and have more positive beliefs, and look for evidence that supports those positive beliefs. And so, to repeat again, all these beliefs are more or less from past experiences, and these past experiences have created what's called the default mode network, which is our kind of ego, our relative sense of self. It's where we habitually live. It's how we're experiencing the world. And it's a big thing that research with psychedelics and psychedelic therapy has shown helps disrupt this default mode network. So for people suffering with a lot of anxiety or depression or other mental health issues like that, their default network's not a very happy place to be. We need to shift that, change that, heal that. But for most of us, just in general, our default mode network tends towards the negative. It tends to, like I just said, we're living in the past. So it's really good for all of us to be able to refresh and interrupt this default mode network and create new patterns there. And it can feel hard, but as you get used to, as you become more and more mindful, as you keep showing up for yourself more and more, there can actually be a kind of effortlessness, right? Meditation practice, mindfulness practice, noticing your thoughts, it can become more and more effortless the more that you do it. And there can be more and more energy released in your system. So as you're working to update your old beliefs and update your default mode network and all that, you should be experiencing more and more energy in your system. I mean, there'll be ups and downs, peaks and valleys, but overall, It should be more life force energy because you're coming more into the present moment. You're less constrained by the past. So the word trauma is being used so much these days, and can be used in different things. But basically, a traumatic experience was a negative, difficult, or overwhelming experience from your past that hasn't been resolved yet. And we need to spend some time and attention and healing to that experience so that it can be processed and released. And these difficult, traumatic experiences often are the origins of negative beliefs. And they're often experiences that didn't happen just one time, but happened many times. They got reinforced. And now, if you're an adult listening to this, try to reframe it as, this is a great chance to heal and change these patterns so I don't pass them on to my kids, so I don't pass them on to other people. I think that is a really helpful experience, a really helpful reframe that can give you more energy. But another interesting point to consider here is, first of all, we have a built-in negativity bias, right? Our minds are biased to the negative. But I was going to say, when you have a traumatic belief that can create a negative limiting belief, a traumatic experience that can create a negative limiting belief in yourself, part of what makes that a trauma and what makes that negative belief so ingrained in you or in me is there was an intense emotional charge when it was created and then reinforced. If someone got bullied at school, it could be traumatic. It could create a negative belief that maybe people aren't safe or other men aren't safe, for example, or it's not okay for me to stand out because I might get targeted. And you could see how a negative belief like that through a lifetime could really limit someone. They won't be expressing their full potential, their full possibility. They won't be doing the things or saying the things or creating the things they want necessarily because they're being held back by that trauma and those negative beliefs. But that intense emotional experience, right? If we really want to replace that negative belief with a positive belief, like I can create what I want, or it's safe to express myself, or I live in a world of abundance instead of a world of lack, we can have these beautiful positive beliefs. For those to really take hold and be transformative, we need to create an emotional charge that can have them really take root and really take hold. And if you're just thinking, those thoughts, or just thinking positively, or just thinking a positive belief without any emotionality, right, without really believing it, it's not going to do so much. I mean, it could be helpful in interrupting your normal thoughts, but it's not going to be operating at the depth that the trauma and the negative beliefs are at. So the good news is we have a lot of tools and modalities that can help shift this. The bad news is it does take some energy, and some work and some time, but it's really worth it. So I want to encourage everyone listening to pay attention to your thoughts. Ask yourself, what are the beliefs underlying those thoughts? What experiences in my past led me to have those beliefs? And what would it take now to really feel all that's there to be felt and process it and face it and not avoid it? And what would it take to have a new perspective that's more empowering and more positive? How could I generate that positive life force energy and emotion and pair it with that belief so that I can actually be living it in the world? Another important thing to consider is we have intergenerational trauma. We are affected by what's happened in our lineage from our parents, our grandparents, our ancestors. And again, this doesn't have to be a negative or bad thing. It can be an opportunity to heal what's getting passed down in our lineages so that we don't pass it on, so that we create a better world, so that we live better lives. But it's good to know that, because some of the stuff, some of the difficulties, some of the negative beliefs, they're not coming from you. On one level, they're not your fault. Whatever happened in your childhood, you were a child, it's not your fault. But especially helpful to consider that, the messages we got from our parents and from society and stuff that happened in the past, that could be showing up. So for example, if you were to have a psychedelic experience, psychedelic therapy, ceremonial experience, some of the material that comes up that could be really difficult might not be from your lifetime. It could be from this intergenerational trauma. It could be other stuff kind of in the collective field. And again, it can be an opportunity for you to help heal it, but it can also be helpful to not identify with it, not take it so personally, have some discernment there about what's your stuff and what's not your stuff. Even though the reality, can be complex and, we are all connected. But I think that's a really helpful perspective. And there's good science showing this phenomenon of intergenerational trauma. It's not, some woo-woo idea or whatever. It's there in the science. They've done experiments where, for example, they've traumatized mice, as terrible as that is. And then they've seen epigenetic markers shifting and changing in the grandchildren, the great-grandchildren of those mice, increased stress response and things like that. And so that's, that's part of the soup that we're swimming in and part of what we are dealing with here. And it's good to know that. So yeah, I hope that's helpful to hear. Another thing that I found to be really helpful is if you are having negative thoughts like we all do, if you're feeling, jealous or resentful of something, or, whatever it is, whatever that voice in the head is saying, if you can notice it, kind of dialogue with it and get curious about what it really wants. Like, what is the underlying desire there? It can be a really clarifying question. The answer can surprise you, and then we can see if we can reframe it as, how do I create more of that in my life? Rather than being angry or resentful or feeling negative about it. And I think that can be beautiful. Then life can become more fun and more creative. I think there's a real shadow side with therapy and psychology, which is this kind of bias towards the negative, the dark, the difficult, going into the difficult, heal the trauma. Like, yes, that's all important and good. And we should honor goodness and happiness and beauty and be able to have fun and not always be biased towards the negative, to be able to enjoy your life. That's actually a large part of the point of doing this kind of inner work. So I hope that's helpful, and I look forward to seeing you next time. So I've had literally dozens of men reach out and share stories of how they were singled out and treated differently and mistreated at Europa University, specifically in the graduate psychology program, which ironically, the graduate psychology program is about 80% women students, about 80% women faculty. So it's ironic that the men there are actually in the minority and that they're kind of singled out. And there seems to be like this idea of shaming and blaming the straight, the white, the men, and blaming them for centuries of oppression or colonialism, like somehow singling out these people is making up for these historical injustices. And another irony is, of course, these people, these men choosing to learn psychology, choosing to go to Europa, are people who are wanting to be helpful. They're wanting to be allies. They're wanting to become healers. And instead, they're getting singled out, castigated, and mistreated. And I've done a couple podcast episodes about it. I've reached out to the university for comment and haven't heard back. And it seems like this pattern just isn't changing. So I cannot recommend going to Europa University at this time, because I don't think it's good for men. I don't think it's good for women. I don't think it's good for anyone to be in that kind of environment. And I've had women reach out with their own stories, specifically around this issue of how men are mistreated there. I mean, I get that no school is perfect, but this seems like a pattern that's been going on for at least 10, 15 years. I don't know how long it's been going on for, but at least as long as I've been involved with the school.